Morning everyone, this is Matt from Trail Rider Camp, and I'm here in the Chateau neighborhood of Pittsburgh at a trailhead that accesses the Pittsburgh Heritage Trail System, or what some people call the North Shore Trail, or I know in some mapping apps it even refers to this stretch as the Chateau Trail. So this is part of a pretty extensive trail system that runs throughout the Pittsburgh area. It connects down to the Gap Trail at Point State Park. You can take spurs into Oakland or spurs onto the south side of Pittsburgh, and it makes for just a great urban trail experience. I would say that, other than the Montour Trail, this is probably kind of the route that I do more than any other when I'm looking for like a 30-40 mile ride that's really local and easy. This parking lot in particular is a really nice place to start because you can see it's a big lot. There's about 20 spots probably all together, and it's clearly marked with signage. So I don't know if you can see me behind me there. It says, for trail use only. I would never recommend leaving a car here overnight. This Chateau neighborhood is a mostly industrial neighborhood, as you can probably hear behind me, but it adjoins some of the higher crime areas of the city of Pittsburgh, what people kind of collectively refer to as the North Side. So I would never leave valuables in plain sight. I would never leave a car here overnight, but you're kind of tucked back in this industrial area where you're kind of out of the way, and it's free parking. You can't beat that. It's accessible off the highway. It took me about 20 minutes to get here from my house. And so what I'm going to do here today, and granted, it's humid. The weather's been really crummy here in Pittsburgh of late. So my kind of tentative plan is to do a ride I do pretty regularly, and that I recommend to people that, if you're an out-of-town tourist, or if you're somebody that likes biking and you're in the Pittsburgh area and you kind of want to see Pittsburgh as a whole, this is a great ride to do because you'll really kind of get a flavor of the city. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to just ride up to the northern trailhead here of the North Shore Trail, just to kind of show you where that stops. I'm going to turn around, come back past this parking lot. I'm going to go all the way then along the Allegheny to where the trail stops in a town called Millvale, and there's free parking there at the Millvale Marina as well. So we'll go the length of that. That's probably about 5-6 miles from here. I'll then turn back toward this direction. I'll cross the Fort Duquesne Bridge to Point State Park, which is that kind of iconic park at the tip of Pittsburgh with the big fountain. It's there that the Gap Trail, the Great Allegheny Passage Trail, begins. I'll kind of ride out on the Gap, leaving downtown. I'll cross at something called the Hot Metal Bridge, and then I'll just kind of continue down the Gap for a while. Typically I go until McKeesport. I always say McKeesport's kind of a good stopping point to then turn around. But again, I'm going to gauge it based on weather today. I'm going to gauge it based on kind of how I'm feeling. Since my last trip, I really have only been out twice, and that's mostly due to weather, but also due to the fact that I have probably about 3 or 4 inches of stitches in the middle of my back, courtesy of a dermatologist. So they told me to take it easy. I'm itching to get out. So we'll see kind of how things go. Ideally, I'd like to get a 40-mile ride in today, kind of show you the route as a whole. But again, we'll see how it goes. So here's where the trail ends at West Hall Street. Pretty definitive that it ends here. It sits right at the corner of the old jail. Another shot of the old jail coming the other direction. Big abandoned property. And this stretch on the North Shore is paved. You get a little bit farther down here to this kind of marina access, you'll see a sign to Bicycle Heaven. And if you're a bike lover, it's a bike shop, so if you need mechanical repairs, they're down there. But then they have this like museum of all these classic bikes. It's really a cool place, worth a stop if you're a bike lover. East End Brewing pop-up location right off the trail. So if you want a beer, they make good beer. Right there. So you skirt right along the front of the casino here. It's a pretty big, impressive building right along the riverfront. You got some nice seating area, looking out at the water. Mount Washington. Now, one thing to kind of comment on that little northern stretch there is that a few years ago, there used to be like homeless central. I mean, it was, you probably had hundreds of homeless people camped out down there. And the city made a big to-do about kind of clearing out some of those encampments. But just going past there, I mean, there's still probably, I don't know, a dozen tents scattered about, and then some kind of abandoned building that looks like there's people living in. Now, again, it's an improvement because a few years ago, I mean, you would find needles littering the trail. You'd find people like literally passed out on the edge of the trail. So it looks like it's improved, but at the same time, there's signs everywhere that say no camping, and the city's obviously not enforcing that. You come past the Carnegie Science Center, and there's an old World War II submarine sitting there docked on the river that people do tours on. So I couldn't take any video of it because there's like a children's group walking across. But just know if you see a pack of people in that area, that's why. So pretty cool to check out. And you come down past the Science Center and things widen up and you're literally right along the river here. You notice that the river is very high. Again, we've had a lot of storms of late. You got downtown, so that's the bridge we'll be crossing over to Point State Park in a little bit. And then just to my left, you have access to Acrisure Stadium where the Pittsburgh Steelers play. And we'll be going past PNC Park as we move our way down the shore here. And just to show you, just past Acrisure, there's a little pathway that kind of comes up from the main trail. And I came up here primarily to divert around a flock of angry geese. But then all along here is all restaurants and bars. And if you're here like on a game day when the Pirates are in town, these will all be packed. Or typically later on, you know, lunchtime and beyond. This is Jason Aldean's bar. There used to be some brewing. All right, so I'm gonna divert from my plan slightly, just do things in kind of a different order. So since I'm up here, just past those restaurants, there's the bike ramp up to the Fort Duquesne Bridge. So, you know, pop it into a low gear, get up there across, and then you're gonna go over to Point State Park across the river. So that's what we're gonna do, and we're gonna hit up the gap and then come back and finish up the North Shore at the end. Fort Duquesne Bridge. Probably the worst bridge in Pittsburgh to drive over, but not bad to bike over. So you're definitely separated. And there's Point State Park. So when you come off the bridge into the park, you come into this central area. There's the museum, which does have a cost for admittance. There's some of the park heading into downtown over there. The fountain, which is not functional this year, is down there. And then to get to the trail again, you're going to want to head down this way and then hang another right. So you're coming down and then sharp right and then hanging another right to get down to the waterfront level, and it'll bring you around to the point itself where the gap's symbol is. So here we are at the river level, Point State Park, where the fountain is usually running. Nice view of downtown. And then right there in front of that biker is the little embossed symbol that says Great Allegheny Passage. So that's the official start to the trail, and we're going to be heading just straight this way. So there's where I just was, and then you're coming straight and you're going straight up this ramp. So through here you're going to be cutting through a parking area called the Mon Wharf, excuse me. And if this river is a little bit higher than it is now, they'll close this whole area because this is a very flood-prone part of downtown. But right now it's still clear. Obviously they've had some flooding of late because you see like the mud and the debris. And this is another kind of common place too for homeless to sometimes congregate. So you'll get to the end of this, and then you'll kind of go up a little kind of ramp at the base of that next bridge. So at the top of this ramp, this is a spot that screwed me up the first time I rode through here. So you can either go across this bridge to the south side, or you can hang a right and continue on the gap proper. So we're going to go that way. It's a little bit more direct, no off-trail stuff. You have one very busy street crossing right here, but you got a signal. It's well marked, it's painted green. There's a sign that says, Eliza Furnace Gap Trail. And then really from here, you got one more kind of road crossing once we cross the river coming up. And that's really it coming out of Pittsburgh proper. Just past that road crossing is Golden Triangle Bike Rentals. So if you're from out of town and you need to rent a bike, that's the place to do it. As you come out of downtown, you go past the new jail, which is right there. And then on one side of you have an extremely busy road, very loud, and then a whole bunch of parking lots. So just know, if you're somebody that does need to rent a bike while in town, and you're doing that Golden Triangle bike rental, there is tons of parking right near here. Tons. Crossing the Monongahela on the Hot Metal Bridge. And it's funny because you can't miss these turns because somebody spray painted Gap Trail on the ground very clearly in multiple places. Just past the Hot Metal Bridge, you have the practice facility of the Pittsburgh Steelers and University of Pittsburgh football teams. So it's a big complex. You can't really see anything for obvious reasons, but it's literally right off the trail. So after you get past the Steelers practice facility, you basically kind of hug the river for a while, a few miles, and you get this active train line off to the right. And then, things start getting a little bit more industrial the farther east you get. And then you come up to this Sandcastle water park. So if you're pedaling through here on a hot day, this might be crowded. Today, again, crummy weather. There's nobody here. Heck, it might not even be open yet. But you'll literally skirt right along the edge of the water park, and then you'll come out into Homestead. And Homestead, you have the town proper, but then you have what's called the waterfront, this kind of like commercial development area. And there's a lot of restaurants and things down there, movie theater. But probably the most dangerous part of the entire Gap Trail is right there. And that is that you need to kind of skirt along the edge of the Costco parking lot. So you have these people that are looking to stock up on their rotisserie chicken, and they're in tunnel vision, and they do not see you. So I'm sure I will not tape along there just because of traffic. But just know you need to be very wary. You just kind of stay along the sidewalk there. Again, it's pretty clearly marked, and you just kind of go along until eventually it's going to bring you behind some restaurants like an Eaton Park and whatnot, where you can see the river again. So here's the water park I was talking about. When you get into the waterfront, there's a small detour because they're doing some demo work, and it's all clearly marked. And then you come down here and you get back on the trail right behind kind of a red robin. So you literally just pick your bike up over the curb and you're back down on the river. As you come out of the waterfront proper area, you're on this little kind of designated bike lane next to this road, and then clearly marked off to the left, it says the Pump House. And this is the location where the Homestead Steel Strike happened, turn of the 20th century, late 19th century. Great place for a stop. Again, people were killed here, major moment in American labor history. So definitely a nice place to take a stop. There's some picnic benches, there's bathrooms. It's a neat place. Now we're back off-road again as we leave the waterfront. As I mentioned, you're going along some pretty busy train lines here. So we're heading in the direction of a town called Duquesne, not to be mixed up with Duquesne University, two totally different locations. And Duquesne is probably one of the frankly poor communities around Allegheny County. You know, it's one of these areas that was a once thriving kind of middle-class community, had all the steel mills right along here where I'm literally riding, and then all that stuff went away. And you know, it's a community that frankly has fallen on such hard times that a few years back they had to close the high school, and they now send all the high school age kids to surrounding school districts. So I'm standing at the top of a little bridge span here. And there's two of these that go over these train tracks. And you can see the train moving along right as we speak. And then this is, you can see Kennywood Park off in the distance, roller coasters, we'll go past that. And then a little plaque commemorating the fact that this was one of the last linkages of bringing the Gap Trail to fruition. And down there, a fully functional steel mill. More up-close view of one of the last functional steel facilities here in Pittsburgh. So this whole Mon Valley used to just be one of these next to the other, next to the other. And now it's basically just this. Right above the trail, Kennywood Park. So sometimes if you stand here long enough, a roller coaster will literally just go roaring by down that track. I'm not waiting that long. So here we are in the city of Duquesne that I mentioned earlier. So to go to like Duquesne proper, the main hub is up that way, which I would not recommend. And you've got like a pretty big textile factory over here. But for the most part, really kind of a rundown area. Nice section of brand new paved trail here in Duquesne. Really, really nice. So the beautiful McKeesport Bridge. Nice pedestrian use bridge. And again, up to this point, the entire Gap Trail has been all paved. So know that it's only once you kind of get past McKeesport that it becomes that crushed limestone, which it remains in pretty much all the way until Cumberland. You know, getting through McKeesport can be a little tricky maybe the first time that you do it, but it's not bad. And then things get pretty rural pretty quick, especially as you get to the town of Boston. So this is my typical turnaround spot. I usually get a snack around here and then I head on back. Different view of the Edgar Thomson Steelworks that I went past earlier. So on a little historical placard here, it says that it's the last working blast furnace in Pennsylvania. So again, if you're looking to kind of experience a bunch of different things about the city of Pittsburgh, or you got a friend visiting and you want to show them, you know, what Pittsburgh's famous for, here it is. Said 10% chance of rain today. Of course, it's now raining. So, and the humidity is so high, I think these things just pop up. I always point out wildlife on the trail, and there's this little section here right behind you know, the waterfront area of Homestead, and they got goats that kind of tend to the hillside. In addition to goats, there appears to be maybe a donkey there as well. So this is all you're going to see in terms of wildlife on this trail. Down at the Mon Wharf again. On my way back, I haven't really taped much on the way back, primarily because of the rain, but it's stopped now. So across the river there is Highmark Stadium, where the Pittsburgh Riverhound soccer team plays. And that's Station Square, an old train station that's now a bunch of commercial stuff, Gateway Clipper, steamboat tours. So a few times here I've had to kind of cut some videos short because of the homeless are kind of out in force in this stretch right down by downtown. So I'm back into Point State Park, and then usually what I do if the park is busy, and it does get busy, especially right along the river there, is on the way back, I'll make this sharp right turn up here, and then I'll just kind of cut through this part past the museum straight to the Fort Duquesne Bridge. So that way I'm not dodging people galore down at the point itself. So we're going to go across the bridge, and then, as I promised, we're going to hang a right and keep going on the North Shore Trail up to Millvale. So right below PNC Park, and this whole stretch, pretty crazy because of the amount of people. It's also lunchtime, so I'm just like dodging people galore that are completely oblivious. So be aware that this area can get very, very busy. So this is kind of how the trail looks. Old Heinz Ketchup factory right through there, but tons of people out, dodging traffic, you could say. So this part of the trail, you kind of look across and you got a very narrow little bit of water. Well, that's Washington Landing over there. There's actually some people doing crew practice down there as we speak, but there's a little spur trail that crosses a bridge over to Washington Landing. So if I get a chance here on the way back, I'll snap a picture, but it's no real reason to go over. There's just some houses and then a boat launch over there and some additional parking. And I went past like two very small parking areas on this trail, but again, they're very, very small. Okay, so I'm at the end of our ride in this direction. I'm at the Millvale Riverfront Park, which kind of connects to the Millvale Marina. So if you dial that up in Google Maps, you'll find this lot, and it's a huge lot. I mean, tons and tons of parking space. Again, there's some kind of rowing facility down there at the end. There's bathrooms, picnic tables. So I always say this is, you have, in my opinion, two good options for doing kind of a, day-long bike tour of Pittsburgh. You can either start here, or you can start up where I did in Chateau, kind of on Pittsburgh's north side, and that gives you free, easy trail access parking then down to the point, to the gap, and anything beyond. So I'm gonna go ahead, turn around, and head back, and maybe I can get a few quick snapshots. So the trail was super, super busy. Like I said, we've had some rainy days of late, and while it rained earlier, it stopped raining, and now everybody and their mother's out here at lunchtime. So it's been tricky too, because a lot of people I'm yelling out, coming up behind you on your left, and they are completely oblivious. They're on phones, headphones. One guy was literally smoking weed, so he was too busy doing that to have any idea that I was coming. So it made for some slow going, but I'm going to turn around, head back to the car, and I might check in one more time on the way back. So this is some of the stuff I'm not a huge fan of this North Shore Trail. So you got some abandoned buildings over here. They're just absolutely covered in graffiti. And then just next to Millvale, below an overpass, there's another huge homeless encampment, which again really stinks, because I'm sure there's a ton of hard drugs in there. And I mean, it's right next to this town, and the town of Millvale itself is awesome. I mean, there's multiple breweries, a lot of bars, restaurants there. So again, from a food drink perspective, if you're starting there, you kind of do the tour and then you end there, boom, you can go over to Grist House Brewing, you can go to one of a slew of other great establishments. So this trail definitely has that category covered. So that area, from PNC Park up through Millvale was pretty iffy. both in terms of just congestion and traffic and the kind of general sketchiness. But down here, when you get by Acrisure and heading back toward Chateau where I had parked, the crowds thin out very quickly. Okay, so I'm back to the lot where I started. Altogether, this route was 42.5 miles. So again, I went from the most northwestern parking spot on the North Shore Heritage Trail down to the Fort Duquesne Bridge, crossed to Point State Park, got on the Gap, went to McKeesport, turned around, came back from the McKeesport Bridge, back to Point State Park, up to Millvale, the other extreme edge of the North Shore Trail, and then back to here. So it took me about 4 hours. It's getting very, very humid. Like I'm definitely, soaking through my shirt here. So ready to get home, get some lunch, and I'll kind of, revisit some things once I get home. All right, so I'm home, and as usual, kind of give my summary feelings about these trails overall. Now, of course, this review is a little imperfect because it's not a review of a single trail. Rather, it's a route comprised of parts of kind of two different trail networks, both which are much, much longer in length. As I mentioned, what I kind of outlined here in this video was a 42-mile kind of out and back, encompassing all of the North Shore Trail, as well as, basically the Gap Trail from Point State Park down to McKeesport and back. From a scenery perspective, I give this a 10 out of 10. Like I said, this is perfect for kind of bike tourism or sightseeing. It really gives you kind of the flavor of a lot of Pittsburgh history and kind of iconic locations, whether it's Kennywood Park or Sandcastle or seeing Mount Washington and the river views. So much to eat up there in a short amount of time. Surface and rideability, I likewise gave it a 10 out of 10. It's the entire thing's paved and the entire thing is extremely well kept. So easy to ride, great surface. From a safety perspective, I gave it a 2 out of 5. A few definitely busy road crossings that I would feel kind of iffy with little children. Again, the homeless encampments, though not an innate threat, you don't like to see that in large amounts along the trail and some of the drug abuse that goes with it. And then, some of the people dodging, especially along the Allegheny River North Shore part, can be problematic. Parking, I gave it a 3 out of 5. Not a ton of parking options available. There's 4 along the North Shore Trail. But like I said, the 2 best ones are the Millvale Marina area and then that area that I parked in Chateau. So both of those are free, accessible to downtown, accessible to the whole Gap network. Food and drink, 5 out of 5. Tons of options, especially in Millvale. There's some great options. And then there along the North Shore. Facilities, I gave it a 3 out of 5. There's a few Porta-John bathrooms scattered. You have one kind of regular bathroom at the pump house over in the waterfront area. There is a water fill-up station right near Kennywood Park, and then some benches kind of scattered around. Wildlife, 1 out of 5. This is not that kind of trail. You're not going to see much wildlife other than those goats I pointed out. And then from a fun factor, I gave it a 5 out of 5. I mean, this, like you said, this is a trail that I do probably more than any other than the Montour Trail. And every single time I have a blast. Probably the highlight of today's ride was I ran across so many people embarking on the full trip to DC and kind of chatting up with them about my experiences. So always a fun time to be had. And I highly recommend that anybody do this kind of route that loves biking and is visiting the Pittsburgh area.